There is a saying that the past is a foreign country, but for many people in Ireland today, this Dáil is becoming a foreign country, a Dáil that they no longer recognise as representing their own views. This Dáil is the most draconian Dáil in generations. There is an authoritarian streak running through the political establishment, unfortunately, in Ireland, and it's one that's shocking citizens across the country. The government is trying to implement a number of bills which are significantly reducing people's human and democratic rights currently. The government is trying to implement the hate speech bill that censors people's views. The government has produced a bill for which a person can be sent to jail for speaking. The government is looking to criminalise citizens who speak respectfully on issues that they disagree with. And this is the opposite of what a liberal democracy means. A liberal democracy is built on the idea that the competition of ideas is the engine of the democratic process. And your censorship bill deletes the right to respectfully but robustly challenge the convention of the establishment bubble here in Leinster House. That bill is so poorly worded that no one, not even the minister who wrote the bill, is sure of exactly what the definition is and how the act will land people in jail. Now, if you ask a child what something means and they give you a circular definition back, you could probably accept that. You wouldn't accept it from an adult, and you certainly wouldn't accept it in a law that seeks to criminalise people on that circular definition for speaking. The Green Party Shanador, Pauline O'Reilly herself, stated in public, and I quote, "All legislation is about restricting of freedom." This is exactly what we are doing here. But that's not true. All legislation is not about the restriction of democratic freedoms. Legislation should actually be about the defence of democratic freedoms. The government is pushing Ireland into an outlier position currently internationally. Ireland is gaining notoriety right across the world in terms of the authoritarian streak that's happening here. We're becoming infamous in relation to this. Indeed, I did an interview at RTE recently, and they only did that interview basically because all of the international media is identifying Ireland as this hotspot of reduction of human and civil rights at the moment. And again, it's an incredible thing that if you look back to the COVID crisis, this is another example of the authoritarian nature of the government. The government created a two-tier freedoms. If you were free to go about your business if you had a COVID pass, but you were restricted from public spaces if you didn't, despite the fact that both cohorts were getting COVID and spreading COVID at the same time. And you remember just a couple of years ago, because of that government policy, we had young people being beaten off the streets in riot gear by police for having a pint. Just a couple of years ago, while at the same time, thousands of older people were dying in nursing homes because the state had pushed thousands of patients out of hospitals without actually checking them for COVID into nursing homes. Now, this bill is another example of that tendency towards authoritarianism in this government. This bill simply restricts the human rights to protest, the civil right to protest. And the right to protest is one of the most important rights that we have, especially in Ireland. Indeed, I, as an Irish Republican, recognise that the civil right to protest was critical in the attainment of equal rights for people in the north of Ireland. Indeed, unionist parties and the RUC, like this government and many of the hard left, also sought to ban public protest and to jail people and beat people off the street for protesting. I think it's incredible that 50 years after those civil rights marches, from Coal Island to Dungannon and Bloody Sunday as well, Sinn Féin today, north and south, are joining with the government in terms of banning the human rights to protest. I shouldn't be surprised. Sinn Féin used to stand against censorship in terms of Section 31, but yet again Sinn Féin supported the censorship bill in the hate speech bill here just a number of weeks ago in this chamber. Now, one of the reasons I believe that Ireland has become so authoritarian in recent years is because the government and the so-called opposition are simply on the same page on many issues. Today, on a rake of different issues, there's hardly a cigarette paper in the difference between the government, Sinn Féin and the Trotskyite hard-left parties on so many issues. To many people, this feels stifling. To many people, this feels like a political cartel. And I believe Aontú is the only political party in this country pushing back against this oppressive uniformity that's happening. It used to be the case that censorship and protest bans were the tool of right-wing dictators. The left used to be a bastion of free speech and democratic rights. Shockingly, that has flipped in recent years, and this government and the opposition in many ways are proof of that. The truth is, if a government such as yourself are willing to delete the rights to life of tens of thousands of the most vulnerable living human beings, deleting the right to protest and the rights to free speech is not an incredible jump from there. I personally don't agree with some of the protests that happen outside of hospitals. I personally don't agree with the small white coffins being used outside of maternity hospitals. And I've always asked people to demonstrate and protest and speak in a respectful manner and utter in a respectful manner as well. But the right to protest, the right to free speech, is not just for the people you agree with, Minister. The right to protest and the right to free speech are actually fundamentally also for the people you fundamentally disagree with. And if you don't hold that tenet firmly, well, then a democratic process does not work whatsoever. There are many concerns in relation to this bill. Some people protest outside the GPs on Saturdays, for example, when the GP services are closed. They do this on purposely, not to interfere with any patients that use those GP services, but they do it to inform people what's happening behind these walls. Yet your bill will simply delete this simple act of letting people know what's happening. It's as if, Minister, you're trying to hide what's happening. You know, what would happen to a mother who offers financial help and support to another mother who's about to have an abortion for economic reasons? We know that the vast majority of abortions in this state are for economic reasons. They are for austerity abortions. And, you know, it's incredible that the parties that call themselves pro-choice actually implement economic policies that make mothers feel that they have no choice. It's an incredible situation, but that's happening at the moment. So if a mother or any citizen was to offer economic support to a mother in that case, they will be banned from doing so by your bill. You know, in Britain we had the situation where a woman was arrested for standing silently in prayer outside an abortion clinic. A police officer actually went up to that woman and asked her what was she thinking. And in answer to that, she said, "I am involved in silent prayer." And in that scenario, she was arrested for that. Are we really coming to that situation here, Minister, that people standing silently are being arrested for the thoughts that are going through their minds potentially outside an abortion clinic? We're not talking about banning freedoms in a small area. Dublin has dozens, if not hundreds, of these types of locations. 100-metre zones would literally seal off significant sections of the city from conversations. Maybe one sister having a conversation with another sister, banned from doing so because of your law. And you're not banning on the basis of evidence, Minister. The Gardaí Síochána came before an Oireachtas committee in relation to this, and they said that there was no evidence in relation to the current situation around harassment and intimidation. And they said they already had the legislation to deal with the laws. The Commissioner, Drew Harris, said that existing laws were adequate to deal with protests outside of GP centres and hospitals that provide abortion. Certain hospital groups, in retort to TDs who blatantly told lies here in this chamber around this issue, said they themselves had not received any official complaints from service users, their partners or accompanying support persons or our staff about protests outside of hospital. The truth is that this is an evidence-free bill. It is ideological, and it's yet another step on the well-travelled road of this government in deleting human and civil rights. There will be a more enlightened generation in this country in the future. Martin Luther King said that the arc of history bends towards justice. Unless you reverse the direction you're going, Minister, future generations will look back on your actions with horror.
Deputy Bernard.